Ledger. The fundamental reason I'm running is because I believe that the spirit of America was based on everyday working people being in politics, not career politicians, not lawyer-lobbyists. And what's happened to this country is that we have a massively corrupt system where there's only two parties who represent less than 40% of the people, for example, in the state, and they're not composed of people who actually worked. You know, I came here as a legal immigrant from India, went through the public school systems, earned 4 degrees at MIT, started 7 companies, creating thousands of jobs in Massachusetts. I represent the everyday people who work for a living. And those people deserve representation in Congress. And that's why I'm running. And we can talk about the policies, but the fundamental issue is that we need a government by the people, for the people, not a government by the establishment of 2 political parties, the Democrats and Republicans, who do not represent the working people anymore in this country.
And do I have it right that you initially pulled papers to run as a Republican in this race?
Yeah, it's a great question. So my background is, I've been a political activist since I've been about 17 years old. I never liked each political party, either political party. I learned something very valuable when I was 17 or 18. I think it was 1984. You may remember this. I don't know how old you are, Neal, but do you remember when Jesse Jackson ran for political office? There were 2 candidates, Ronald Reagan and Walter Mondale. And a number of us who were very interested activists, we thought Jesse Jackson was one of those guys who was against the establishment. But if you remember, at the last minute, he gave all of his votes to Walter Mondale, choosing the lesser of 2 evils. So what I learned at that time was that both political parties are really part of the establishment. And then real change in this country has really taken place by everyday people. You know, women didn't get the right to vote because of the Democrat or Republicans. In fact, the Democrats laughed at Susan B. Anthony. Or civil rights. It wasn't Lyndon B. Johnson. And so you have change agents, and then you have a third, more insidious element, which I call the not-so-obvious establishment. That's what Jesse Jackson was. And in the last election, the reason I got involved in electoral politics, which I never thought I would, was because here you had the establishment, which was Hillary Clinton. And you can see how all of the establishment came around her. The Romneys, the Obamas, the Bushes, everyone. You can imagine over here was Donald Trump. Whether people like him or not, he was an agent of change. And he was representing everyday working people, blacks and whites. And in between that came Bernie Sanders, who was really not part of the not-so-obvious establishment, who was really the left arm of the party to bring the votes back into the establishment. And in Massachusetts, you have the same dynamics in this election. You know, I ran as a Republican, with all due respect, as a Lincoln Republican, and you found out that you have Charlie Baker, and the Mass GOP, who got so afraid of me. In fact, when they brought me in for an interview, they were railing against me why I voted for Trump. That was their question. And so I could see in November the writing on the wall that they already had selected Jeff Deal as their puppet to be Charlie Baker's stooge, and a deal was struck that he would get to be lieutenant governor and he would not run against Baker. So we saw all of this. Anyone who's on the inside starts seeing what's going on. And so we dumped the Republican Party and we went independent. It was the best thing we did. But it is a fact I gave the Republicans a chance.
Sort of jumping ahead to something else I wanted to ask you about. But let's do that. So, I mean, you mentioned the website repjeffdeal.com, and I saw your, and I haven't done enough to research your claims about what role, if any, he played in the Trump campaign in Massachusetts. But I did want to ask you what evidence you have that the Republican Party in Massachusetts is colluding with the Democratic Party in Massachusetts.
It's a good question.
And that Deal is colluding with Warren.
It's a great question. Look, anyone worth their salt who studies politics knows that particularly in Massachusetts, there's one party. It's called the Democratic Party, and they have 2 faces. You look at Charlie Baker. He's taking selfies with Elizabeth Warren. His politics are not conservative republicanism. Jeff Deal was a longer Democrat than he was a Republican. He voted for Joe Biden. These are just, points of fact that have been already talked about. Where it gets even more insidious with a guy like Deal is just like Bernie Sanders was used by the establishment to bring people back into the mainstream Democratic Party. That's the purpose Deal serves. Now, the most insidious thing is you should talk to Vincent DeVito. The Worcester Telegram has reported this, and the Politico has reported front page. And we have the official letter, which is on repjeffdeal.com. There's a letter from the Donald J. Trump campaign referring to Vincent DeVito as a chairman.
Right.
Period.
But that's not what I'm asking you about.
Well, no, well, you need to understand. So why would the mainstream media, which is the liberal mainstream media, which we've told them over and over and over again, sent them to documentation, keep referring to Jeff Deal as a chairman and co-chairman? Ask yourself that when they have the facts in front of them. And the only reason for that, in this beautiful cartoon that Ben Garrison did, who's a big Trump loyalist, which has the two-headed animal, Republican Democrat, and Deal riding Warren along with it.
Yeah.
If you actually have the facts that a guy is not the chairperson, why do you promote him? Their only reason being because you're colluding, because they're afraid of Shiva Ayyadurai, who's a true Trump loyalist, and they want to steal votes away from me. Deal has no interest in defeating Warren. He exists to build his brand equity.
Right. So I understand that claim. I'm asking about the evidence behind it.
Well, first evidence is the fact that you actually have a document that says Vincent DeVito was a chairperson. That's
not the thing that I'm asking about.
Well, do you want to defend Deal then? I don't know where your question is.
I'm asking, do you have any evidence?
We've given the mainstream media the evidence that he's not the Trump chair.
Okay.
So if you have evidence that Michelle, for example, did not commit a crime or did commit a crime, and you write the opposition to it, and you're part of the Boston Globe, with all due respect, they printed the 3 white candidates on the Republican Party, and they left my picture out. You know this, right? Well, that's called collusion. When you actually have a candidate who's actually listed as a Republican candidate, this is on October 17th, this is a Democrat mainstream media, and puts Deal, who had just announced, puts Lindstrom and Kingston, who had not even announced, puts 3 pictures of the 3 white Republican candidates, leaves my picture out. So that is the establishment, Boston Globe, who is trying to manipulate the perception of people. That is called collusion. And when I wrote to Jim Sullivan, I said, racist Boston Globe leaves out the darky. It went viral on the internet. He calls me at home and he goes, why'd you call me a racist? I said, you put the 3 candidates of the Republican Party and you left me out. So that means the Boston Globe wants to try to manipulate who the actual Republican candidates are. So that's called collusion.
Can I ask a more specific question? A more specific claim you make about Baker promising Deal that he can be his lieutenant governor in 2020?
Yeah, so what you should do,
Is there some evidence supporting that?
Well, it's called people within the Republican Party who've shared this with me at the senior most levels, and you guys should go do investigative reporting on it.
Somebody has told you this?
Multiple people have told me this. So let's look at the facts on that. Charlie Baker... if that's what you're saying... Well, no, I'm not saying... I think what we need is real journalism. In 2014, as you know, there was an election. Charlie Baker was running against a guy called Mark Fisher. Now, as we know, to get on the Republican ballot, you need not only 10,000 signatures, but you need 15% of the delegates at the convention. Mark Fisher went into that convention, the Republican convention, April of 2014, with nearly 30% pledged to him. And you can do your own research on this. I've looked at the data, I've looked at the spreadsheets. You know what he gets at the day of the Republican convention? 14.9%. And you can talk to many people. There were ballots being shredded. I've talked to military personnel over there, Navy SEALs, and Charlie Baker and the Mass GOP was colluding against Fisher. Now, Fisher filed the lawsuit, and he won, and Cooner and people like Howie Carr attacked Fisher. It was a complete hit job on him. So this year, or this past election, the deal was that Deal was going to run against Baker. Baker didn't want the same nonsense that took place in 2014. So he struck a deal with Deal, telling him, I'll back you for Senate, don't run against me for governor. That was the deal. Now, what should happen is the mainstream media should look at what I put forward, go talk to people, and off the record, I'll give you names of people to go talk to verify. But so when I saw that happening, I knew that they had no intention of putting me on the ballot. And if they've done, and by the way, this is not only Massachusetts. You can talk to people who ran in Connecticut. Mysteriously, people get below the 15%. So this is a way that the party controls access to, keeping outsiders out.
Well, and I know this issue of whether Deal served with the Trump campaign or not.
He didn't serve at the time. There was 1 week where he was apparently sent Dean Cavaretta, who
Well,
sent a
I
request.
saw you also have on the website that he doctored a photo to make it look like
Doctored a photo. We had a forensics expert look at
I saw
it.
that. I saw that. So
there's
my
three
question-
hands. There's three hands in the picture.
No, I saw that.
Yeah.
So my question to you is to what extent is this election for you about who's more loyal to Donald Trump, you or Jeff Deal?
Well, that's only a small part of it. The point here is, if you look at Massachusetts, about 6.2 million people when I last looked. Maybe it's a little more. 5.5 million eligible voters, which means over the age of 18, right? So if you have a big circle, that's 5.5. Within that, 4.5 million people are registered to vote. Within that, only 3 million people actually vote, meaning are active voters to some extent. Of that 3 million, 700,000 people vote in a presidential year, and then the 2.3 million people vote in a presidential year and a midterm. Okay, and by the way, this hasn't changed historically, plus or minus 5%. And we have all the data. We've looked at them. I'm a big data guy. What's interesting about that data is 60%, nearly by 2020, it's going to be 60%. Right now, it's around 57% of Massachusetts citizens who are registered are unenrolled. Okay, or what we call independents. Only about 40% are Democrat or Republican. So when you look at the reason the Trump election is interesting to bring out, when you actually look at the data, guess how many people voted for Donald Trump that were Republicans?
I assume you'll tell me.
About 200,000, okay? Guess how many people voted for Donald Trump who were independents? 800,000. So people always say, well, he didn't, Hillary got 2 million, he got 1 million. But what I'm fascinated by is the million that voted for Trump, 80% were independents. And in fact, those independents, as you studied, are anti-establishment. They weren't voting for the Republicans or the Democrats, particularly when you consider Charlie Baker on the eve of the election as he was voting, or on the day of the election, front page Boston Globe, I'm not voting for Trump. So independents essentially go either way, and in this case, they were anti-establishment. Very much like the people that Jesse Jackson or was bringing up anti-establishment, or Bernie, right? At the last minute, they sold them out. So the tactic of the establishment, and by the way, when I mean the establishment, to be clear, is I'm talking about Charlie Baker, Elizabeth Warren. Okay, he's part of the establishment. So we call him Dirty Deal. Deal is a creation of Charlie Baker to suck back the Trumpers in this state back into the Mass GOP. And I think this is very, very important for them. And so when we list on that website that so how do you do that? You say that he was a chairman of the Trump campaign. Now it went from co-chair to chairman. It's fascinating, right? Before it was co-chair, got away with that, so now it's chairman. The second thing is you position him initially against Baker, which is what he was. If you remember, before the convention, he didn't sign the pledge, and then right after the convention, he endorses Baker. You try to associate yourself with Trump, so you Photoshop a picture. You have a Saudi lobbyist who's his campaign head, which has been widely talked about, and part of the way the Boston Herald, where Holly Robichaud works, is to put something out and then suppress it very quickly. And the fifth part of this is that you have a guy who actually was a Democrat. He voted for Joe Biden. Democrat longer than he was a Republican. In fact, the same year that Warren switched from Republican to Democrat is when Deal switched from Republican to Democrat. So when you put all the facts together, how can you assert this guy's a Trumper? He's not. And if you talk to Trump loyalists who are on the ground...
So, but my question was, to what extent is this election about who is the biggest Trumper?
Well, what is Trumper? What is a Trumper? Okay? I'm not talking about Donald Trump, being, showing loyalty to him as the individual, because I don't know, I've never met. I'm talking about the phenomenon. As a person, a scientist who studied politics, the Trump phenomenon was a huge growth of people, poor whites, everyday people were tired of the fact that both parties weren't serving their interests. And the media, the mainstream media, was actually fake news. And Trump was on there attacking those three elements, Republicans, Democrats, and that. And that represented what I call Trumpers, anti-establishment forces.
So you're talking about Trumpism more than...
I'm talking, Trumpers, like if you talk to...
What he embodies more than...
Yeah, I don't know Donald Trump, right? But I can tell you that his election in 2016 was a significantly historic one. I have a lot of my friends at MIT who were pissed off that I voted for. I've never voted before until I voted for Donald Trump. Because in him I saw someone who was going after Democrat and Republican. And
Can I
thought that
ask
was a
you
good thing.
that question in sort of a different way? Why, speaking to voters, why should they vote for you instead of Jeff Deal?
Well, I don't even know why Jeff Deal's not the issue. Jeff Deal is a loser. He's set up to lose. It's the issue is why should they vote for me over Warren?
Well, nonetheless, there are going to be three names on the...
Right, but Jeff Deal's not the issue here.
And presumably, a lot of people will have their mind made up about...
Well, I know the Patriot Ledger is pro-deal, right? Is that fair to say?
So
I don't
I'm a
want...
reporter. I have no...
Well, I've seen your articles. You know, anyone looking at it, come on, let's be honest. So this is not about Shiva versus Deal. This is about 5.5 million voters, and we are bringing out people who've never voted before. Jeff Deal exists to steal votes from the Trumpers back into the GOP. So it's not about...
Can I just stop you?
Yeah.
So you're campaigning, you're talking to voters.
We talk about Warren.
What's that?
We talk about Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah.
Go to our...
When they're in the ballot box, because like I said, many people have their opinion about Elizabeth Warren made up. So
I don't think so.
You don't think so? So you're not trying
No.
to...
Go look at the last, if you believe in polls.
Mm-hmm.
So let's, again, look at facts instead of making up stuff. Because if you look at the Suffolk Boston poll, they looked at likely voters. Okay, this is how they rigged the polls. Who are likely voters? They're the 2.3 million who vote in a midterm election, which is a very small set of people out of the 5.5 million. And that's called your very likely voters. Mm-hmm. Then, if you look at one column, they said we also talked to somewhat likely voters. You know what the numbers were there? 28% Warren, 24% Deal, 14% me, 35% undecided. And among the undecided voters, I get 25%. Mm-hmm. So what we're talking about is that there's a huge set of citizenry who we're energizing to vote, mm-hmm. who have never been, Neal, involved in the voting process. And this is why the Democrat-Republican oligarchy is so anti-democratic, anti-American. Because they take the 5.5 million mm-hmm. and they squeeze it down to this small subset. In a midterm, 2.3 million. Mm-hmm. And all these other 3 million people are left out of it, and all the polls are done here. It's called sample size statistical bias. Mm-hmm. And that's what's going on. So the real issue is, who are our voters? Well, our voters are people who are really pissed off that Elizabeth Warren voted for the Monsanto Protection Act. I spent 12 years of my life exposing Monsanto. Mm-hmm. They don't give a damn about Deal. Deal doesn't even know what Monsanto is, where genetic engineering is. Mm-hmm. Our voters are people who are concerned about free speech in this country and the violation of Google and Facebook, and that I actually have a solution because of the Postal Service. That's this other 3.2 million people, and that Elizabeth Warren gets funding from Google and Facebook. Our voters are people who are really questioning what was the Trump movement mm-hmm. and want an anti-establishment force, and they're starting to recognize that Jeff Deal is a Baker stooge.
Well, let me ask, you were in East Boston yesterday. You're talking to voters. You never have voters come up to you and say, listen, I'm on board with you 100%. I hate Elizabeth Warren, but I'm not sure whether to vote for you or Jeff Deal. You never have that conversation?
No, we get that very rarely. What we get is more this conversation. How come you have not been reported in the mainstream media? Mm-hmm. How come the Boston Globe put the 3 pictures of the 3 white guys and left you out? Mm-hmm. How come Howie Carr put Deal on there and doesn't put you on? Mm-hmm. That's what we get. Where have you been? Because right when people see my credentials, mm-hmm. you know, a real American, came as a legal immigrant, went through the public schools, got 4 degrees at MIT, started 7 companies, produced thousands of jobs. How can you compare this guy to Elizabeth Warren as a lawyer-lobbyist or a failed sign salesman? Mm-hmm. They wonder, how come the mainstream media is actively hiding you? How come they haven't put you on the debate stage? And what is going on to this country? That's what we get. I mean, you can ask Richard here and Michelle. We were just out there, in fact, at East Boston.
That's right.
And a young girl, who's Richard's daughter, said, let's Shiva debate, and asked Deal, how come you and Warren are keeping him off the debate stage?
Mm-hmm. So you don't feel like you're campaigning against Jeff Deal at all?
No, if anything, we tell the truth about Warren, mm-hmm. and we tell the truth about Dirty Deal, who is an arm, is promoted by Warren. Look at the email campaign.
You feel like you're running against them together.
You nailed it. You nailed it. So that's why that Ben Garrison cartoon, I don't know if you've seen it.
Yep.
It's an awesome cartoon. And this has been the recurring process in American history. That's why Trumpism, as you said, it was such a phenomenon. It was going after, remember, Trump was going to run, I think he did run in the Reform Party. Remember that? Ross Perot. Mm-hmm. there is a 43% of Americans across the country are declared independents now. Declared.
Mm-hmm.
In Massachusetts, by 2020 it'll be 60%. I think 80% of the millennials are saying that they're going to register independent. People are tired of this two-party system, and I think that's a real opportunity for media. The reason many of the newspapers are becoming irrelevant is because they chose one of the other parties. They don't see this trend taking place in American society, which is people are. Look, I went to one of the biggest. As you know, I'm into science and nutrition and all these things. I went to one of the biggest health conferences. Amazing data. Of the 70 million millennials, you know what the big difference between them and the baby boomers are? Mm-hmm. These people want truth and authenticity in advertising, marketing, everything. Mm-hmm. So the young millennials, and particularly now I think they call them the Gen Z, are particularly interested in truth. You can't really fool these people anymore. They can see through, be it Warren or be it, Dirty Deal. They can see through them. They're starting to see, whoa, wait a minute, the guy's not allowed on the debate stage. He got 20,000 signatures. That's un-American. I mean, it's like climbing up to the top of the Himalayas and then now throwing in something else. Mm-hmm. It's a civil rights violation in many ways. 60% of people are independents. We got on the ballot. In fact, as you know, we sued. We have a lawsuit pending. Preliminary injunction against UMass and the debate people who put us off the stage. You know what the Judge Stern said?
Where's that filed, by the way?
In federal court.
In federal court, okay.
And so you're looking at someone who fights for free speech. I didn't see Elizabeth Warren or Jeff Deal at the free speech rally. I didn't see them defending us when the city of Cambridge said we should take off the sign, only the real Indian can defeat the fake Indian. I sued on behalf of the people of Massachusetts, and we won a landmark federal lawsuit. That was in the middle of this campaign.
Can I actually ask you about that?
Yeah.
Because you mentioned the cartoon, it's in all of your ads, it's on all your social media.
The real Indian, fake Indian?
Right, and specifically referring to Warren as Pocahontas. And
well, we don't refer to her as Pocahontas, we refer to this as a fake Indian. It's a very a distinct difference. Mm-hmm. And the reason we do that is, you see, what's fascinating is when we put up that symbol on the bus, mm-hmm. the first symbol we had is Be the Light. By the way, our school bus, I think you may have seen it, right?
Yep,
and then the next thing we had was Fight for America. 2 weeks before, the night of the St. Patrick's Day parade, like a couple million people show up. Mm-hmm. At 4 in the morning, our team was out there and put the new thing. It said Shiva, the picture of me, the meme of me and Warren in her headdress, and only the real Indian can defeat the fake Indian. The reason, and by the way, we went to the St. Patrick's Day parade. You can see it. Millions of people cheering us on. Mm-hmm. Everyday working class people, white and black. The reason that meme is so powerful, and by the way, I think PhD thesis will be done on this, mm-hmm. Is that it's not about race. It's about integrity. But it's even more deeper about that. When it comes to race, we are, Scott Adams, who does Dilbert, had me on a show, and he goes, you've hit upon something quite brilliant. He goes, your ad there is bringing up the need, an invitation to have a deeper discussion about race in this country. So when we're at Whole Foods, right, mm-hmm. a lot of liberals at Cambridge will come up, and the vocal minority who come up will start screaming at me, calling me a white supremacist. Mm-hmm. It's fascinating. And I said, look at my skin color, and I'll say, you know what, you don't want a dark person on the ballot. And they go, what are you talking about? Because we've shattered something in them. The white liberals in this country, white liberal racism I call it, have configured racism to say, basically their view of not being racist is don't use the N-word, don't use the Confederate flag, and change the name of Yawkey Way. Mm-hmm. And then on the other end, you have the Republicans who said don't speak about racism, because if you do, it means you're making excuses. Now, in between that is a real definition of racism. And Shiva Ayyadurai's definition of racism is this: it is using race for one's economic and political advancement. And that's coming from a dark person. And by the way, these other two definitions come from probably about a handful of people out of Harvard University. Mm. And for far too long in American history, we haven't had a real discussion about race. And it is probably one of the most central issues in the Gallup poll. Mm-hmm. It's the second most important issue. So Elizabeth Warren is a racist. And this may be hard for liberals to comprehend. She used affirmative action. Mm-hmm. Affirmative action was a gain of the civil rights movement. for political advancement. And we've been hammering on that. So what does the Boston Globe do? They, enlist a reporter to do a 10-page treatise. Oh, she didn't get into Harvard because of being a Native American. It's the most dumbest thing. They must think we're all stupid. I've been on review boards. I used to teach at MIT. Mm-hmm. No institution, I'm sure the Patriot Ledger is not going to say, oh, we hired Richard because he's Native American. You're never going to say that. Or we hired Shiva because he's black.
So, because you're starting to say, so the meme is about what you're saying.
It's about integrity.
The definition of racism.
It's two things.
Economic advancement.
Yeah, it's about integrity, mm-hmm. and it's about really that we put the headdress on our purpose, because that's what she did when she listed herself in 1986-87 in that faculty directory, mm-hmm. right? She used race to get advancement. Mm-hmm. And anyone who knows this can observe that with a rational mind. That's what people are upset at. Now, racism also occurs the other way. When you have the right-wing, quote-unquote, Republicans, right-wing people point blacks as the issue. It happens both ways. So Boston Globe leaves out the darky, okay? And just wants to talk about how poor whites are the problem. Over here, you have the right who points at blacks being the problem. They're all criminals, or they need to be incarcerated. So in America, you have the people in power use race war, and they never address the fundamental issues. So that's why you have the average net worth of a black person is $8 in Boston. Think about that. It hasn't changed. So so-called, in all of this inclusivity and diversity, the average, if you look at the balance sheet of a black person, is $8. And God forbid you say anything in support of a poor white person whose infant mortality is going like this on a curve, right, while the rest of the developed nations are going like this. If you talk about their opioid addiction rates, then you're called a white supremacist. So they have you bucketed. And so a dark-skinned American guy like me sure should not be a Trump supporter, sure should not support poor whites, and sure should not be calling out Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden as racist, or Elizabeth Warren. That doesn't compute, because they have put people into very nice buckets. And that's what independents are. We think independent-minded.
Yeah.
Right?
So I think I've got the idea, but let me ask you about the message, because many Native Americans find the use of Pocahontas in a
we're not using
derogatory
Pocahontas,
way.
though.
What's that?
We're not using Pocahontas.
So if I look, which may
you can look.
If I look over your social media, you won't find Pocahontas anywhere.
You won't. Go look at it. If there is, it may have been something supporting Trump, but we have used the message, fake Indian.
Yeah.
And it's real.
Was that deliberate to not use Pocahontas? Because
I don't think that's because that has other. We use real Indian versus fake Indian.
Right.
We call real and fake. Okay. Fake deal, dirty deal, right? It's a very particular message to talk about the fact that we live in a society now. You have fake news. You actually have invisible news too now, but you have fake science. And I know this as a scientist. I have 4 degrees from MIT, including my PhD. I've published a lot in major journals that people who publish get tenure at any major institution. So what's happened, though, in academia, we talk about fake news. There's something also that I've coined, the concept of fake science. Behind fake news, today journalists don't do scientific research. They simply cut and paste. I'll give you an example of fake science. Monsanto as a company. If you are, even friends of mine at Cornell have said, Cornell has the biggest agricultural college, you could be a Nobel Prize in biology, and you say anything against Monsanto, you'll be destroyed. So what do I mean by that? Monsanto's genetically engineered foods have no safety assessment standards. I was the first one to expose this in a series of 6 research papers. Now, I was able to do it because I made a lot of money running my own companies. I started my own research foundation. I wasn't at the tenure golden handcuffs of a lot of professors because you have to play the game. It's pay-to-play science now. So you write articles saying, oh, Monsanto's foods are safe, and the fake news media simply cuts and pastes. Now, after we did this, the news came out about a professor at the University of Florida being paid off by Monsanto to be their spokesman. News came out about a professor at Harvard was literally cutting and pasting Monsanto's ideas in papers. So what I'm saying is the concept of fake goes beyond just fake Indian. Fakes. Elizabeth Warren, by the way, did fake science. Bigger than her being a fake Indian, in 2005, she wrote a paper, which is basically, she said the reason small businesses go out of business is because 42% of them because of high medical bills. Then in 2009, in the American Journal of Medicine, it's amazing this woman has no degrees in medicine, gets to write in the American Journal of Medicine saying that 62% of businesses, small businesses, because of high medical bills. Those two papers, Neal, because it has a Harvard logo on it, and the journal prestige of the American Journal of Medicine, become the two pillars that are used by Obama for the Obamacare thing, saying we need to get everyone on big insurance. You see what I'm saying? Academics are the fake news behind fake news.
So this is great, because this segues into exactly what I wanted to ask you about next, which is, because I want to talk about your platform and how you feel about
yeah,
issues.
definitely.
And
we've had to do the fake Indian, real Indian thing. It's our great ad campaign. But then let's talk.
Yeah, let's talk about some
when
issues.
People
That's
talk
why we're
about
here,
our
right?
platform, people say, Jesus Christ, this guy has brilliant ideas. But we've had to go through all of this just to even get on the news, because the collusion between the Democrat and Republican media is to keep the darky out. And I mean darky in a broader sense, dark matter. You know, the universe is, I think, only 5% matter. The other 95% is dark matter. That's sort of what we have. You know, there's all this dark matter of people who don't participate in the electoral process.
So, but yeah, so to get to issues. So, I was looking through the different sections of your website, and you have what I assume are pretty concise descriptions of your position on different issues. And
We have so many videos, man.
I didn't have a chance to get through all the videos. The thread that I kind of see through there, and I assume it comes from your background as a scientist and an engineer and an innovator, is, and tell me if I have this right, but the thread I saw there was get government out of the way, and science, engineering, innovation will save us from many of the issues we face. Climate change. Is that?
Yeah. Well, you're almost there, but first of all, I appreciate you doing that. So let me tell you. So I look at the founders of this country, right? And I'll tell you where I'm precisely coming from. The founders of this country, first of all, were scientists, engineers, blacksmiths. At the time they were developing their ideas, they were children of the Renaissance, right? Or the children of the Enlightenment. Okay. And the notion of the Enlightenment was, if you believed in something called a creator, whatever you viewed that, and then there was the individual. And the notion of the Enlightenment was to remove barriers between us as a product of the universe and our creator, so we could have the full idea to experience life, right? And the notion also was that we were also imbued with the aspects of the creator, right? This was sort of the philosophy. So the idea was to remove those things so we could have a direct relationship with our creator. That was the foundations of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Now, where does that come from? Well, as a biologist, I can tell you where it comes from. If you look at your body and my body and everyone's body in this room, we have about 10 trillion cells. Those cells, biology has shown, are what are called self-organizing systems. They work bottoms up, and they communicate among each other to create what's called an emergent property called a human being. It's called the property of emergence. This is very different than the fascist model, which Mussolini's advisor came up with. And he said something interesting. He had a notion of the cell, the human body. He said there's a central command and control, and it tells all the cells what to do. It's bullshit. Excuse my language. It's actually the other way around. It's a bunch of cells work together to, it's bottoms up. So it's called a self-organizing system. And that's how the universe actually is organized. And that was the Nobel Prize that was given to Pogroni in 1957. So I base it on that. So if you go to that aspect, my view is that from the time you got up today and the time I got up today, I probably made 100 different decisions for myself. What clothes to wear, what to eat. No government was involved in that. Now, if we let individuals, we believe in the humanity and that concept, and let individuals make decisions, I believe they will self-organize into all sorts of things that we don't even know about. So to experience fully what it means to be a human being, right? Let 1,000 flowers bloom. And out of that, so many new ideas and diversity will come. And out of that is where you create a very diverse ecosystem of human culture. And when you start putting that as Democrat and Republican, right, or into these divisions, are you for abortion, against abortion? So 4 issues. Are you for or against abortion? Are you for or against transgender rights? Do you believe in lower taxes, higher taxes? Okay, great, you're a Republican, you're a Democrat. Yeah. That's what we do. Now that is missing the complete totality of what it means to be a human being. And so what I believe at a fundamental level, it comes down to Again, if you use, wood is a composite fiber. I don't know if you know that. It's made up of a bunch of materials which come together. So strength comes from not just a salad bowl, but diverse objects melding together. That's why composite materials that we build aircraft wings were a major discovery. So what does the establishment do today? Well, they want to have central command and control, fascism. So they limit discourse. You have a finite set of Republican, Democrat, don't let Shiva on the debate stage, right? God forbid, we don't know what he's going to say or what he's going to bring up issues, just have very secure issues. You reduce the level of meritocracy, and this is what we see, and you put in loopholes into laws. My parents left India because America was known as meritocracy. It was a land of integration where the best ideas survived, and you had rule of law. Well, what do we have now? Well, sanctuary cities, it's okay, right? So that means, so then you take people who are actually doing immigration, you stick them in the back of the line. So we don't have rule of law. Harvard University, it's all a branding game that they do. 30% of their admissions are legacy admissions. A lot of dumb rich kids get there. And, I'm going to be speaking at the Asian American, there's a Department of Justice ruling that the courts are going to move forward with it. Well, so what do? You do support diversity, which means skin color, but you have a multiracial aristocracy now. So it's seen that you're inclusive and diverse if you let people in just on color, but not on meritocracy. You see, so this is occurring, and even professors at MIT, I hate to say it, after an undergraduate, realized a lot of these people were here, not because they were smart, but because they played the game. And you look at our political system. Why is a guy who has 4 degrees from MIT, got 20,000 signatures, started 7 companies, actually created jobs not allowed on the debate stage? And 2, in my view, dopes are. One woman who lied to get into Harvard, right, faked, scientific papers, as I just said, and another guy who's a failed science salesman, couldn't win a state rep seat, promoted. And the American who mowed lawns, played baseball, was valedictorian, salutatorian in his class, number 1, won every major award at MIT, is not. What is going on in this country? Where is a meritocracy? And so, but in nature, you create diversity and you create the best, and the society moves forward. So, we've forgotten that, So let's take the extreme. Let's say Harvard was all filled with Asians. Let's say that happened. What's wrong with that? Well, then let's rise to the occasion. You know what? Mom and Dad would say, study hard. What we've done is we've lowered standards. Okay, Richard was saying in Cambridge, they've taken away AP classes. Give everyone awards. Give everyone trophies. This does not create a great society. What it does is creates mediocrity. It creates, as the old British had, they were all, it was all inbreeding. And that level is going on even in nature. Monsanto inbreeds plants, and they're making less powerful plants which can't stand viruses. So it's a whole systemic thing that's taking place end to end. These institutions are creating conditions where we're not supporting meritocracy, we're lowering standards, and that's why I'm running.
So, and I want to ask, because you're talking about Monsanto, for example, and as a man who has spent his life with engineering and science and innovation,
and activism.
And activism.
Yeah.
But I'm setting up a question, which is, a lot of people feel that science is under attack these days. That there's a lot of contempt for science and critical thinking among, you might say Republicans, you might say President Trump himself. But do you feel that? Do you feel that people don't respect science the way?
Well, so it's a great question, by the way. I always say there's a big difference between science and engineering. Let me tell you the difference. Scientists gather data, and they look at their data, and then they use statistics to fit a line to a curve. Okay? So let's say I have a bunch of dots that go like this. I could fit a curve like this, or I could fit a curve like this. Climate change is taking place, climate change is not taking place. Scientists can lie, engineers cannot. Look, you see, if you build an airplane that falls out of the sky, that's engineering, right? You build a car and it doesn't work, that's engineering, right? Your business, you build a piece of software, it has bugs. Engineers cannot lie, scientists can. And this is a fundamental difference.
Would I be wrong to say that engineering built upon science, though?
Engineers built upon scientific principles. So, for example, Bernoulli's principle has existed for many years about the fact that if you have a wing and airflow goes under the wing,
right,
that you'll get a normal lift. Okay, well, that's a principle. But now go try to build an airplane,
yeah,
okay? Just because you know that principle doesn't mean there's various designs. You have to figure it out, and it took years for us to understand that principle and actually build a flying machine.
So I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
So my point is, there is science, which people can gather data and they build models of the known reality of the world, and then there's engineering. And I think the reason science is under attack, legitimate attack, is because there has been fraudulent science. And one of the things I would do, for example, I would pass legislation that if you're an academic and you write fraudulent papers with government funds, it should be 20-year prison sentence. We do this with Wall Street people, but we do not throw academics in prison when they do fraudulent science. They get a slap on the wrist. Because remember, I grew up in India where we had a caste system. We were considered the lowest of the low, and you had the Brahmins, the priesthood. They were on top. That's what we have in America. You don't see any, those scientists who've written fraudulent papers about Monsanto, they should go to jail. Anyone who has written fraudulent papers about climate change should be in jail. But we do not attack these people because presidents come and go, but their advisors from Harvard are always in the background. Right? So in many ways, Harvard has an hegemony, and I pick on them because they're here, on thought and human narratives. When if you actually look at it, Harvard is a $40 billion, $50 billion hedge fund.
So, and speaking of climate change, because I know you say on your website that it doesn't really matter whether you believe in climate change or not.
It's irrelevant.
Right.
That's irrelevant. The issue is you want to lower pollution.
So does that? So my question to you is then: do you accept or do you not accept the science?
Well, here's the deal. Climate change has been occurring since the Big Bang took place.
Right.
Okay? There's been various cycles of climate change. Okay?
Right.
The issue is what's causing that. And you and I could argue that until ad infinitum. What I do talk about, they have a great video up there that I did, is that the guy who started this thing about the Earth's temperatures rising because of human intervention, he had set the temperature, the average temperature in the late 80s as 15 degrees. And he was saying the temperature is going to go up. Well, it went down in the 90s to 14.7. You know what he did? In a footnote in a New York Times article, he changed the 14 became the new 15 became the new 14. He changed the average temperature to 14. What I'm trying to say is that if you look at the video I did, that those in power, when money is involved, they can use anything even good for manipulating truth for profit. So Al Gore, the IPCC, these guys created carbon credits, and it's an equity. And if you actually look at the Paris Accords, it has nothing to do with lowering pollution. It allows China to go from 11 billion tons to 22 billion tons. How is that reducing pollution? It's actually allowing China to pollute more, because when they achieve 22 billion carbon tons of pollution, then 2013 is when the carbon tax gets in, and all those people who've been trading that equity, they're going to be trillionaires. So this is basically saying pollute, 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 and then we're going to make money off you with carbon credits. And I'm saying let's use innovation to lower pollution. And I'm a big proponent of clean air, clean water, and clean food. I'm the guy who believes that we should clean up the food supply. We should, go after companies like Monsanto. There's amazing innovations that are coming out. One of the students I met at MIT and how you can clean up the plastics out of the ocean, right? There's amazing things we can do for actual pollution, right? But it's not going to come through the Paris Accords. The Paris Accords is going to make Al Gore quite wealthy, right? It's basically about supporting this swindling of telling people it's okay to go pollute.
Well, because
I want to talk about health.
Into your platform.
Yeah.
So I take your argument that issues are far too often used to, pile people under different labels in terms of your support for abortion or what have you. But when you are in the Senate and bills are coming to you, on what issues do you see yourself furthest from Elizabeth Warren and Jeff Deal? What are the issues?
So first of all, the way we need to approach issues were how the founders of this country did. They looked at every problem where Lincoln did, right? Lincoln had to bring divisiveness people together, and it was always looking at things very rationally in a very these are complex issues. So let's take gun violence, okay? One party says, I believe in this, by the way, I believe in the Second Amendment,
Yep.
but gun violence is what I call a complex systems issue, like all of these issues. So when you look at gun violence, it's not like, I'm a proponent of the Second Amendment, right? Let's give guns to every man, woman, and child, okay? That's one issue. The other issue is, let's disarm everyone, it's killing our kids. Well, if you actually look at gun violence, first legislation I'd support is, let's do, in the next 6 months, 9 months, let's fund research to really look at the systemic issues that have driven gun violence. And I would argue it's a multiplicity of factors. One being the fact that we don't enforce existing laws right there, that are already there. Number two is, it's been shown over and over again when people come off antidepressants, right, which a number of kids are on, the behavior of violence goes up. And there's papers written on this. There's also the fact that we live in a violent culture, man. We live in a culture where both political parties support the military-industrial academic complex. We send young 17, 18-year-olds to go fight wars in Iraq and tell them to go bomb Syria, etc. And those same 17, 18-year-olds come with PTSD, and one student with PTSD or one person coming back with PTSD affects 100 people in their community, right? So we have violence systemic in this country, which is part of the war machine. So I think we should do research in that. So I'm saying the difference between me and both of these, frankly, people who should not even be represented, who are such at a low base, is I take a systems approach to these problems, and we really go to the root cause. Let's take another issue like immigration, okay? Both parties don't really want it. By the way, Trump is part of the enforcement. Executive branch enforces the laws. So it's not about him. I'm going into Congress, and the purpose of the Senate is to craft laws, and Congress is not interested in solving the immigration issue. One segment makes money off illegal immigrants, right, which is low wages, and the other segment gets votes from them. So none of these people are incented to really solve the immigration issue. If we really want to solve immigration, we have to understand that we do exploit illegal immigration. And we've never, as a country, ever, for example, Mexican immigrants, we never gave them clear citizenship. So the left, in some ways, aspects of the left are true about that. But we don't want to address the fact that we have to solve this issue. So I would impose a rule, right, that no one should be taking a vacation in the Congress. Let them get on a whiteboard, like you have a deadline, I have a deadline, and you cannot leave until you solve this problem. And that
what would an immigration solution look like?
This is
what does that mean?
Yeah, so I think it should be in the spirit of what America was built on, and it should be by rule of law. So, for example, first of all, you can't take people who actually are in the immigration process, who've applied, and stick them way at the bottom of the line. That's what we started doing. Some people who are applying for their green cards now have been shoved 75 years behind when you actually look at it. So first is, let's look at all the illegal immigrants, which is a legacy we have. Let's take all the people who are really criminals, have committed, they should be sent out. Now let's look at those people who are actually, maybe they've been working really hard. Some period of time. They haven't committed any crime. Let's put them on a path to immigration. Because you know what? That's tax revenue. And one calculation I did came to close to about $250 billion. That's not bad. That's good for America if they've been good citizens, but they don't get to go at the top of the line. They go at the bottom and let them start at the bottom and come up. I mean, that's sort of the fundamentals of this issue. The third aspect...
So it sounds like built into your understanding of the solution is some compassion for people who...
You have to have compassion.
Came into the... Okay.
Look, America was built on compassion, right? But it was also built on rule of law. So you have to balance that.
And it sounds like you acknowledge that given the broken immigration system, there were... Those in power have been encouraging illegal immigration.
They have.
You said industry relies on it.
Industry. I mean, if you look at the balance sheet, the P&L statement of many of these companies, I'm sorry, I don't mean to hit on Harvard. I think most of the Hispanics and the blacks are cleaning the toilets, okay? And we should look at, how many of them come from, what backgrounds they come from, and who's... So what I'm saying is both parties and the elites have been using illegal immigration. It's been a nudge, nudge, wink, wink. So we can't go blaming illegal immigrants for illegal immigration when the Congress of this state and the elites in this country have been using illegal. So if you want to solve immigration first, you can't leave Congress. No more vacations. You sit there and you craft the laws. You cannot leave, right? That should be the spirit of the principle. The other thing is we should support merit-based, skill-based immigration, because what we've done is we talk about look, my parents came here, so this is very personal to me. My parents came here in 1970. My dad actually had to submit all of his resumes. He had to submit reference letters. He was an engineer. My mom was a mathematician. And that's how they came. My dad came first. We had to wait about a year before I could come, so we had to wait in line. So I think that's honoring that it's a privilege to come into this country.
Yeah.
And I think my parents are absolutely, you expect that, right? You try to get a visa to go to India, you have to get a visa, right? So we have to honor that. But we also should recognize that the establishment and the government has not been honoring the immigration policy themselves. So that doesn't mean you penalize all these people either. Obviously, criminals and those people I think they should be sent out, but you come up with a tiered model that is compassionate, but makes it actually valuable for this country because you get a lot of tax revenue.
If I can ask you about some other questions.
But I want to go to
some
health.
of these are going to be sort of culture war questions, which...
Okay, I also wanted to go to, policy-wise, I want to come to health because I have a very powerful solution for solving health care.
What is your position on abortion?
So here's my position on it.
Yeah.
That I believe there are two lives. Okay, again, looking at it very rationally. If you look at the epithelial does form within 3 days, right? There are two lives involved here. So anyone on the left who says, oh, it's my decision, it's only one life, well, that's not true. There are two lives. There's been 100 biological papers written on this. So I believe there's two lives. Now, in the rare cases, right, my view is abortion should be rare. And any woman I've spoken to who's had an abortion, they don't feel good about doing it, right? So on the one hand, it's a personal decision, but on the other hand, know that it's not just your life. From a pure systems understanding of biology, there are two lives involved. That's my position on abortion. And I'm not going to take pro or anti. I'm saying that this is a very important personal decision, but there are two lives involved.
Interesting. But it sounds like that understanding allows for some.
I'm saying the left and right tries to bucket everyone.
Right.
And issues in life
but
like gun violence.
At the end of the day, the only votes available to you as a senator are yes and no.
No, that's not true. That's what I'm trying to say. No. What I'm trying to when you vote on something, but you can vote on things, and you can take a systems approach to this because the 60% who don't participate, are actually people like me and you talking right now. They want to have discourse, and I believe many of these issues we need to have open discourse on them. We don't have enough discourse in this country anymore. We need to really go into some of these issues, and I think out of that will come compassion and understanding and truth.
You were talking about the Senate being the body that crafts legislation, but of course they're also the body that confirms judges. And I'm just curious what your thoughts were about the recent confirmation.
Well, first of all, Kavanaugh's, from a pure scholar standpoint, he's more than qualified for that job, right? What took place, though, was completely, in my view, outlandish that took place in this sense. And I have a very interesting view on this. Meaning, separate from Kavanaugh, on his credentials, he should be confirmed, in my view, right? But what we saw took place was, again, the establishment of Republicans and Democrats. A lot of people are actually disgusted by both parties, what took place in there. Because if you really think about it, I think both of these people are not everyday working people, be it Ford or Kavanaugh, right? They went to a pretty elite prep school, right? They're not your everyday working people. And in fact, most of those people in those chambers weren't everyday working people. And what I felt was that in some ways both of them, on that personal issue, were not being true. Okay, meaning this: here was Ford. Okay, I don't know her history, but if I were on the Senate Judiciary Committee, just on a personal note, I said, look, what was a 15-year-old doing at this thing? Let's just step back. If what was a 15-year-old woman doing with these frat boys? Okay, if that were my daughter, I'd be pretty concerned, right? And yet, you want to now, later on in life, 40 years later, point to...
I don't think they were frat boys. They were still in high school at the time.
Well, but I'm saying, quote-unquote, frat boys, getting drunk and having... You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And the point I have is that, on the one hand, you're bringing up...
I think they were 18.
18 and she was 15.
I mean, when I was 15, I had 18-year-old friends. I don't think that's that...
No, but I'm saying that the point is,
that it's a pretty significant thing to go to a party, right? I would just ask her that question, right? And then later in life, point the finger and say that I was sexually assaulted by these people, right? I mean, there's a contradiction there. And this is a larger contradiction. It's a cultural issue, right? The other thing is he kept amazing notes for himself, right? Beautiful notes. Said, I'm a Catholic boy. Well, you also got wasted, and you don't even remember where you went. That's a little bit contradictory, right? So what I see is, on a very cultural thing, people, a lot of people go to prep schools, I'm sorry. They can get away with a lot of murder, and they're monitors, and they have an entire culture which protects them. Everyday working people do not have that. If you do something bad, you get your mugshot, you get arrested, you get records. So my point is that there's a bigger issue here, separate from, I would have, said Kavanaugh should have been confirmed. This whole, what we saw was a cultural issue take place here, and a whole drama and theatrics. In some ways, it has nothing to do with the American people. It is this whole thing about one rule for the establishment and another rule for all of us. A lot of the conservatives came to the aid of Kavanaugh. People here locally, but yet those same conservatives, put up a picture, a mugshot of me, which was outright dismissed. I was outright dismissed. A woman had done this to 2 other people, but those same conservatives who today support Kavanaugh were trying to use that mugshot. And by the way, Jeff Deal had paid Howie Carr to do that to me. Jeff Deal, conservative, who now supports Kavanaugh and say this was wrong. So these are the Howie, Charlie Baker's son, molested a woman on an aircraft. I don't see anyone reporting on this. So what I'm saying, I see contradictions. As maybe it's because my journey as a person of color, maybe my journey as a working class guy growing up in New Jersey, and I see these contradictions. There's a rule for the establishment, and there's a rule for the rest of us.
Healthcare.
So healthcare, look, my entire life has been really focused around health as a researcher, as a scientist, as someone who's passionate about it. I grew up in India where my grandmother was a village healer. She worked 16 hours in the fields. By the way, the traditional ways, be it in America, Ireland, all over the world, was you always had a village healer. You went to the local doctor who took care of you. In India, they practiced traditional systems of Indian medicine. My grandmother could observe your face, figure out what was going on, and she'd come up with combinations. It was personalized medicine in those days. So I've been very interested in medicine. When I came to the United States, as you know, I came here in 1970. By the age of 14, I'd completed calculus, ended up working full-time at a medical school doing medical research at the age of 14, where I invented the first email system. When I came to MIT, deeply interested in medicine, but I was profoundly upset at the fact that the modern medical system triages people. It really comes from wartime medicine. You take a person, if they have a headache, you may see 3 specialists. So recently, medicine is trying to figure out precision medicine or personalized medicine. So a lot of my life has been focused on preventative medicine and doing medical research. So my solution is based on what I call real health. And what that means is a recognition, first of all, that the entire discussion of healthcare does not include this fundamental recognition that we need to lower the cost of healthcare. And why is, in fact, we have created a system that it perpetuates high costs in healthcare. So you have a collusion between big insurance, big hospitals, and big pharma. It's this triangle of collusion. And at the center of that collusion, which many Americans do not know because it's not even discussed in the press, are called GPOs, Group Purchasing Organizations, and PBMs, which are the pharmaceutical equivalents. These 2 organizations control the supply chain of medicine from the manufacturer to the CVSs where you get it. On this, they're the 3 PBMs, or the GPOs who control everything that occurs in the hospital. So if you walk into a hospital, every object in that hospital, the stapler that's on the nurse's station, to the bedpan, to the catheter, is controlled by 3 GPOs. Those GPOs, starting around the late 90s, early 90s and early 2000s, were given the rights to do kickbacks. They're the guys, the middlemen. In the earlier form, they were ways to lower costs by hospitals being able to aggregate. $250 billion in waste right there, up to potentially $500 billion. And they're allowed to give kickbacks to hospital